You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we will be talking about the action-packed Day 3 of the second test between England and India from Lords. What an awesome day of Test cricket it was. We saw a wicketless morning session as Johnny Bairstow and Joe Root put on over 100 runs together. Then we saw India fight back a little bit in the afternoon as they picked up a couple of wickets before England stabilised it. And then the final session. Well, it's fair to say it was absolute carnage as wickets fell. At one end. Standing tall among all of that was Joe Root, who finished the day on 166. Siraj, the pick of the Indian bowlers. We're going to get into all of that in loads of detail pretty shortly. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Dan Weston, who's in a hotel with the Birmingham Phoenix. How are you doing, Dan?
I am good, Jack. Yeah, great day's cricket, great night's cricket last night. So yeah, plenty to talk about. Pretty buzzing. Yeah.
I've just realised I've undersold Joe Root there by 14 runs. He actually got 180. It was an absolutely monumental performance. We will no doubt talk about him quite a lot in the next half an hour or so. But before we do, just a few quick messages for our listeners and viewers. You should follow the Cricket Podcast on Instagram and Twitter at The Cricket Pod. You should head over to Patreon, patreon.com/TheCricketPod, and get involved there. There's a couple of benefits. I think you can get a hat. You can meet the podcast boys. And the other thing is we're sponsored by Woodstock Cricket. Buy your Woodstock Cricket bat from woodstockcricket.com, I think. TCP25 is the code you'll want to use to get 25% off. And Dan, I did a really, really quick summary of the day there. I think, normally on these shows it's best to talk about the star performers. The two that really stood out today for me were Joe Root and Mohammad Siraj. I'm pretty sure every time you come on the show we end up talking about some century that Root's made. So why don't we mix it up a little bit and talk about Mohammad Siraj first. His spell towards the end of the day, it's really brought India back into the cricket match.
Yeah, and it's quite amazing, really, because I think when the last time we did the pod during the last test, we speculated whether he might be shushing the crowd as a sub-fielder. Actually, he shushed us today with a pretty sweet performance.
Yeah, no, he was exceptional. He came back into the attack. He'd taken 2 wickets yesterday when we were at Lords. Thanks to the people who tuned into the drunk podcast we did after that. So he was carrying those 2 wickets, and then towards the end of the day, he just managed to start getting movement from the pitch that no one else had really managed to achieve, jagging the ball back into Ollie Robinson. I think he had him out LBW, or close to LBW 3 times in 1 over. Gets him the over after that. That's England's sort of last really recognised batter. And not even batter, like tail end of the can bat. Yeah. And it's really brought the game back together. We thought he might be dropped after he was a little so-so at Trent Bridge. Phenomenal performance from him, I think, throughout that innings. By far the pick of the bowlers. Is there anything that he was doing that the others weren't? Maybe. I mean, it's interesting to see Bumrah, for example, go wicketless today.
Yeah, I didn't see all of it today. I was sort of travelling back from Nottingham and then I had a few meetings and stuff like that. So I've gone in and out of the game. I watched the last sort of hour and a half, 2 hours, and I think latterly, I think that someone like Bumrah in particular was just trying too hard, if that makes sense, the no balls and just trying to get in front.
Recording in progress.
Yeah. That's right. Carry on.
Yeah, it's just getting frustrated and probably lost a little bit of composure, and that was obviously Anderson's worn a few bruises from that last barrage, which was was fantastic theatre in itself. I mean, we talk about, like, people say that Test matches are the purest form of cricket, and I don't know if I'm wise. Obviously, traditionally that's the case, but from a sort of neutral perspective, sometimes I do like watching a lot more short format. But then the last sort of half an hour with Anderson resolutely standing up to Bumrah whilst he's getting frustrated bowling no balls, and Anderson wearing half the balls on his body somewhere, where was amazing theatre. It was so good.
It was. I mean, it was kind of well batted from Anderson to survive that over. What was it? Was it 10 balls long? Did Bumrah overstep 4 times?
Someone posted on Twitter and said that they missed the umpire holding up the white card after 5. Double over.
He was good. We've covered Siraj. The other main man, of course, was Joe Root. Here's 180 here. What's he scored? Almost half the runs for England. Pretty much half the runs if you factor in that there were 33 extras, so half the runs off the bat. A monumental performance from Root. I don't know if it was as difficult here. In fact, I mean, let's be honest, the pitch was quite flat. It was a much easier deck to bat on. And the ball wasn't doing as much in the air. And the bowling did get a little bit tired. But to go back-to-back against this India lineup, he's having a career year.
Yeah, I think that generally speaking, people kind of lump him in with that sort of the top 5 Test batsmen of the current era. And I think there's actually probably I'm sorry to tell our Indian listeners that I think there's actually a case for him right now being the top 1. And he's absolutely superb. He showed it twice in this Test. He hasn't scored a ton for a fair while. So I think that in Test cricket, at least, there's an argument to say that Root is the number 1 right now. I think we said last week as well that ton last week was equivalent of like 160 on another day. And,
yeah.
And obviously he's shown that with a 180 today again. And I mean, to score half of the team's runs pretty much. And I mean, it's a monumental achievement. And I think he said last week as well, he's almost like the kid at school who's just so much better than everybody else. And he's shown it again today.
It was so noticeable yesterday when we were at Lord's. So we saw a lot of the Indian batters play. We saw 4 England players, including Hamid for 1 ball. But it was remarkable how much more time and how much more comfortable Root looked compared to everyone else, and just the ability he had to score kind of effortless runs. He's got a game that adapts really well to a lot of different conditions, I think, and you can see today and yesterday the scoring areas he used, predominantly square of the wicket, didn't really drive down the ground, played very, very late all day long, used that late cut to like tremendous effect on a pitch which I think it's quite hard to get out on, but might not be the best surface in the world to bat on. Mm-hmm. You saw effectively how that extra level of versatility that he has led to yet another century. I think it's his 5th of the year. There are 2 English batters who have managed 6 in a year. Michael Vaughan is 1 back in 2002, and I think Dennis Compton in the 50s. So he's got a pretty good chance there. I think 3 more home tests, and then I think 3 of the Ashes tests as well played this year. He has scored 1,244 runs this calendar year in 19 innings, over 10 matches. So he's now he's 544 behind Mohammad Yusuf's record. He will play more matches. I think there's a really good chance that he will break that mark for a calendar year. Don't you reckon, Dan?
Yeah, no, definitely. And the 7 tons in particular looks very attainable.
Yeah. There's a few people in the chat saying Steve Smith. Is Steve Smith not the best batter in the world, Dan?
He hasn't played for a while.
Yeah, I guess on what we've seen in the last 6 months, it's very hard to make a case for anyone besides Joe Root. I think Williamson's done some good stuff, but
absolutely, yeah. But I mean, this is a supreme run of form right now from Joe Root.
Yeah. Just a quick question: if we wind back to yesterday, when India posted 364, did you think that was a good score overall on this wicket, or do you think they came in under par?
No, I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. when they're 2-6-7 for 2, you could probably say that was under par from that situation. But I think any score 300 plus batting first against England traditionally has put you in as a massive favourite over the last few years. England are not generally. You have a very poor record of batting second against 300 plus. So yeah, I think India probably would have taken that before the start of the match, but maybe not. So I say 2-6-7 for 2.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair appraisal. And someone's asking how Siraj is doing so well. All his balls have a full scrambled seam. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think he's going for a kind of more extreme version of the wobble seam that Anderson and Broad are probably the two best proponents of in world cricket at the moment. I suppose what that means is that it does reasonably unpredictable things off the surface. You throw in the Lord's slope, the famous Lord's slope, and maybe the pitch taking a little bit more after tee, and that's I think it combines to be a little bit of a perfect storm for him. What else happens? We saw Johnny Bairstow. Dan, in the past, we've talked about Bairstow and being slightly derisive. Not really sure why he's in the team. 57 today, was it? That's decent going for him. Big partnership with Root. Has he justified his recall?
I wouldn't go that far. I think he's justified being picked for the next test. I don't think a 50 really proves anything. In fact, when the 100's done, I'm going to write a lot of articles because I've got a bit of downtime after the 100. And one of the articles I'm going to write is actually the sort of before and after effects of a big score on a player's expected average. And the fact is that a lot of the time, say you've got a expected average of 40 in Test cricket, you've got an 8% chance of scoring 100 in that game because you're a good player. And there's like a probability distribution curve that you can assign to a range of scores. And actually, if you score 100 and you've got an 8% chance of scoring 100 before the innings started, you're probably not a better player or not much of a better player after you score 100 than before you score 100, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So maybe if your expected average is 40 before you score a ton, then after a ton it's like 41, and the probability distribution curve moves just very, very slightly to the right. And I think that's where we go with Bairstow. I mean, I said last week we don't know if he's a good Test batsman, and I still think we don't know if he's a good Test batsman.
He's certainly not as bad as I think I thought he'd be. He's had a problem for quite a well-documented problem with being bowled, basically, and he does, at the least, seem to have changed his technique enough that that is no longer such an easy mode of dismissal. And India do have the firepower to bowl at the stumps, so they've got some very good exponents of the bowling at the stumps tactic. So you would think that if that were still a lingering problem, it would have been exposed by now. He was out in a really weird way, bounced out by Shami, who was bowling short with the old ball, effectively just to get through to the new ball without going for too many runs. And if those dismissals are still in his game, that's definitely going to cap what he's capable of achieving in Test cricket, because it's an unnecessary extra false shot that he basically played that's cost him his wicket, and you do that, and like you sort of say, Dan, if you play those shots, that's a tick back on your expected average. So this 57 might have, he might have shown that he's a little bit better, but there's still some problems there. We also saw Butler and Moeen Ali get 20s. Josh Butler looked pretty out of form. I don't think it was the greatest wicket for him, for his game. In as much as it was quite slow, and he likes to play the ball a fair way out in front of his eye line. It basically wasn't the surface for him. And then we saw Moeen and Sam Curran out of consecutive balls from Ishant Sharma. Are you a fan of Moeen being back in the side, Dan?
That's a controversial question. You've landed me in it there. I don't really want to comment from that perspective, but
cool.
What I will say is that I think there's a few people have raised this fact on Twitter, and I'm not specifically referring to Mo's call up. I'm referring to this as a policy in general. is that to me it strikes me as extremely weird, and shows how England are really searching for solutions and confused with their selection policy. That a guy it wasn't in the squad for the first test has suddenly leapfrogged two players who are also spinners for the second test. So, I mean, does that mean that they got the selection for the second test right, or does it mean they got the selection for the first test wrong? We don't know. But no, I'm pleased for him because I know he wants to do well in Test cricket as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can't comment, but I can. I think your points about the selection are really valid here. I mean, it was peak England the day before the match when it looked like Ollie Robinson was going to be the senior seam bowler, and England had called up a spinner, not picked the two spinners that were in the squad. We're going to play who knows who in various different batting positions, and I mean the whole career for Moeen Ali and the way the ECB have managed that has been slightly curious, I think. I think he probably falls into the category of player that I mean, I don't know. England don't really know what to do with. There was a time when England had about 5 all-rounders, and they couldn't fit them all into the team in very well-defined roles. So they bounced up and down the batting order. Sometimes they bowled, sometimes they wouldn't. A lot of them probably weren't good enough to be in the side for either their batting or their bowling. And that created a very well-balanced England team, but not a particularly good England team because there weren't really any elite players either way. I think at the moment that's slightly shifted, right? Particularly with Wokes out and Stokes out, there's room for there's definitely an incentive to make that slight trade-off in terms of picking somebody who's maybe not as good a test bowler because they can bat, and so I can understand their thinking around Jack Leach and Moeen. But the original decision not to have Moeen in the squad and then to bring him in, it does basically demonstrate that there's a flaw in how they're selecting players in the first place, I think.
Is this flaw worse because Ed Smith is not there? I mean, I don't know necessarily whether Smith was a great or good or bad. We don't know because we're not privy to the individual decisions that he was allowed to get through or not allowed to get through. But now he's not there. It's the coaches and the captains picking the team, and I think that, to be honest with you, I'm going to be really honest. I don't think that a lot of in cricket, a lot of captains are very qualified to pick teams.
No, I think that's probably true. I mean, that's not really one of the skills that you'd think actually is required.
Over the last couple of years, I've got to know a lot of players, and I can tell you right now, and this is not. I'm not saying this is the case for Joe Root at all because I don't know Joe Root, but I do know a lot of players, and they almost always are ridiculously affected by recency bias with their opinions. So they always rate players who play well against them, even if they basically crap in 80% of the other games that they play. They really rate the players who do well against them, and this is just so commonplace with players. So having a captain as a part of your decision-making process, when basically their sample size of matches that they watch is probably the ones that they play in, probably isn't a great long-term strategy.
Yeah, and there's a big incentive as well for. I think to some extent, there's two other things in this. There's a big incentive for players who have played against a player who's done well against them to over-exaggerate how good that player is, because then it makes them look less bad if that player is maybe average. And the second thing is, if you're making those calls within the dressing room about who plays and who doesn't play, I don't know if you can have a completely unbiased. You can have your decision-making process will be completely unbiased because you are mates or not with all of these players. So there's rumours, for example, that people don't get on that well with David Malan. Now, should that affect whether he's selected for an England team or not? Well, if he's producing, it probably shouldn't. It's for the coach, the captain, and the players to maybe manage that relationship better, not to decide we're just not going to pick the bloke because we don't like him.
I can tell you again that being a good bloke is massively valued in cricket.
Yeah, and I think you see that. I think there have definitely been some selection decisions. I would probably venture that Bairstow is one of them for this test that are based around how much they like a player and not taking that unbiased clinical view of what they're actually going to produce for the team. As it happens in this match, Bairstow's got 50 and sort of it's very hard to say they've made a bad call there. But let's see what happens over the next 10 tests. He's going to go to Australia, you'd imagine now, that in England's middle order. We have seen that story before, and it has not ended well. So is there at this point in time, are we sure he's the best person for that role? Well, we don't know because we haven't tried anyone else. What else happened today then? Let's have a quick look back through the scoreboard. Basically, Root was batting with people for a long time. There was a comedy run out. Dan, I presume you've seen the Mark Wood incident.
Mark Wood one, yeah. There was a review to see if Cody was really keen to get Root out instead.
That was absolutely phenomenal. I had no idea what Root was doing. Root clips one into the leg side. There's a single. I think there's 2 balls left in the over or something like that, or maybe 3 balls left in the over. It's a classic case of just leave the less good batter to block out 3 balls. Keep your good batter on strike. Root doesn't even turn around after running the single, and Wood, he's full steam ahead. He's not even looking at the ball. To make matters worse, he's gone to Jadeja, who's like absolutely nailed on to wing it in over the stumps.
It was like in the 100 when Owen Morgan decided to take a quick single on against Chris Jordan last week.
Yeah. So he's gone. That was really funny. Wood gone for 5. I wonder, so similar to your point about how India might have been a bit disappointed at 270 for 2 to only end up adding 90 more runs or 80 more, 100 more runs to their total. England at one point, 340 for 5. Have they underperformed here? Total blown away a little bit.
It's opened the game up. Yeah. I mean, I guess at 340 for 5, they're in a position where they could, in theory, put under India under a significant amount of scoreboard pressure. 100+ lead would have been very attainable from that position. And now we're in a position where they've got 27-run lead, and if India can get to say like 260 for 5 or something at stumps tomorrow, then England are going to be under a bit of pressure. If India say batted another hour on day 5, and then they left England like 2.5 sessions to see out. England by collapsing have opened up that possibility at least.
Yeah, they have. I don't know if you'll know this off the top of your head. I certainly don't. Or have you ever heard of a batter facing 2 hat-trick balls in their innings?
No.
That's Root's pulled off that feat. It could be another record for him.
I know when Imi bowled his first ball last night, we realised he was on like a 4 in a row.
Yeah. So obviously he came in after Haseeb Hameed was bowled, and that was a bit weird. Just sort of missed a ball hitting halfway up middle stump, but it was what it was. And then Curran nicking off to Ishant Sharma at the end of the over meant that by the time another over had been played, Root was on strike again there. Saw them out. Saw both of them out. Okay, I think that's most of the stuff.
We've got something else to talk about.
We've got what is it? Yeah, go for it.
Jarvo.
Oh my god! That was incredible. I've never seen that happen. I've also never seen the TV show, not a streaker, pitch invader. Yeah. So usually it's like, we're just going to cut away to a picture of some cranes here, while the stewards harangue this guy. But no, they gave him a full billing. He was on air for a good minute or so.
Apparently, he's like part of this like prankster group that's done a lot of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Basically, if you haven't seen it, what happens is that when India go back out after lunch, a random fat geezer walks out with them with Jarvo 69 on his back, in full whites. He's got spikes on and everything, and he gets a fair way out. I mean, he's like almost to the middle of the square. I think Virat Kohli's thinking about where he's going to place him. and then one of the stewards clocks on and they come and take him off the pitch. I think the Indian players thought it was absolutely hilarious. He protested by pointing not at the badge at the sponsors, being like I'm supposed to be on the pitch, but was pointing at, I don't know, whoever India are sponsored by. That was excellent. You also mentioned that the commentators were talking about expected averages, which is probably something in your or that you might deal with as part of your day job.
Yeah.
What were they saying about that? Because I was on air commentating myself.
So Mike Atherton and Andrew Strauss were talking about the sort of expected averages and weighted averages. They were maybe saying, I think they were alluding to the fact that in runs in Australia might count differently to runs in England in different conditions and stuff like that. And I'm a massive buyer of that strategy and that kind of useful statistical techniques. I do a lot with my own recruitment work. And generally speaking, I mean, like, so for example, last week, Root, big score in a low total. Today, Root scored almost half the runs. Like this is huge for his weighted average, for example. Whereas, you know, Hamid getting a first baller in a pretty big total is not so good for his weighted average. So yeah, it's a thing, definitely a thing, and I think that I don't expect it to be published on Twitter anytime soon in terms of, you know, being made available in the public domain. But I think some smart teams are really going down that road in terms of using that for their recruitment and selection.
I know Tim Wigmore wrote some articles in the Telegraph a little while ago about weighted average, and he's quite in with Freddie Wild from CricViz, and they shared the information there. And in the 2018 summer, Josh Butler's weighted average, for example, was double what his actual average was based on when he'd batted and who he'd batted.
Yeah, I saw that, and I don't know how they've worked that one out.
I didn't agree with it, but
no, I don't either. I've done a lot of work with weighted averages, and one, I wouldn't use it over such a small sample, and two, I don't really see such huge discrepancies over a large sample either. So, I would be skeptical about that, but I do think it's a really useful concept.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, it's at the very least, it should be applied to home tests and away tests, or tests based on which region they're from. One of the tricky things possibly about using them is that even now, judging a test pitch is somewhat subjective, I think.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can look at team scores as a rough barometer, but I mean, CricViz's data from day one suggested that pitch was actually quite difficult, and that India did very, very well to get the score they did. I was watching that, and I thought it's been quite a slow, hard to get out on pitch the whole time. I mean, CricViz, they said their projected end of day score was 244 for 9, and I'm not really sure that was correct, to be honest. After the first day,
it's difficult because they don't.
Yeah, they don't share any of the actual information, so we don't know how they've worked out that it was a 7 out of 10 difficulty pitch. And especially when one of the teams is 270 for 3 at the end of the day, and you know, James Anderson is on the other side, you'd think that is quite. Someone's been quite lucky there, or been extremely good, and that's a little bit of a divergence, I suppose. But I think you could do groupings. You know, England, South Asia, South Africa, and Australia, probably relatively similar, and project better who is doing well in what conditions. I know that's one of the reasons that not for Rahane for India is probably still quite a good pick for them, because he has, I guess you say, a good reverse split in that he averages better away from home than he does at home, and when you're playing away from home, that is useful. He's been terrible in this series.
I see someone on Twitter say that Jarvo might have honed for him.
Well, I thought it was interesting that India went for Jarvo over Ashwin, but I guess for later in the series. There's a few other questions that have come through. One of them's kind of related to this pitch point, and it came through on Twitter. Let me just bring it up. From Monkar, who asked, why are England not taking advantage of home? Why are England not taking home advantage by preparing bouncy wickets? It does. I think this is quite a neutral wicket for a home team to have rolled out. I don't think that it massively it has benefited England. So I think Omkar's got a bit of a point there. Yeah. Why aren't they doing that, Dan?
Oh, don't ask me. I've got it. It reminds me. I thought about this. I was speaking to someone about this yesterday. Is that I remember when I think Kent played Lancashire in a Vitality Blast knockout game. I think it was 2019, maybe, if I remember rightly. And they were playing Canterbury, and in their infinite wisdom, prepared a rank turner against like Matt Parkinson and all their other spinners got rolled completely. It's like, why would you do that? And it makes sense. I mean, like if England go to India, we're going to get spinning wickets and we're going to get spun out against them. So what on earth wouldn't you create a green top if you possibly can against India?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I was genuinely a little bit surprised. I mean, I said on the preview show for this match, my prediction for the series was 3-1 India, and I thought that England would have a chance when the ball did loads. So, and I thought, recent history at Lords suggests that Lords is one of the venues where it's going to be quite alien for India. So to be playing on the surface that they're playing on is I don't know if maybe they didn't think it through. Maybe it's an accident. Maybe, I mean, there are rumours that England want to play on flat surfaces so they can get used to being beaten by Australia on the same kind of pitches down under.
It wouldn't surprise me if that's the case at all. And it's just bizarre that they put so much weight into one series. It's like I don't support Tottenham, right? It's like Tottenham recruiting a whole team just to give them the maximum chance of beating Arsenal. Rather than obviously we're not going to win the Premier League. We're really not that good, but you know what I mean. Like you don't disregard the whole competition you're in as long as you beat your local rivals.
The other thing is like England are definitely going to lose down under. It's it's not definite, is it? But it's such an uphill task. You could beat India, and I think for a lot of. I don't know how this will shift over time, but I know more Indian guys or guys of Indian, heritage who support India and care more about that rivalry than I know Australians. For I don't know, maybe a younger generation, the whole obsession about the Ashes when there's, frankly a bigger local rivalry that we experience every day. To one side, it is a bit odd. We've had a few more questions. One about these no balls. So Bumrah bowled loads of no balls. So I think he's gone through 12 in the innings. Is that because of the slope or what? I mean, I don't know if you've heard from any cricketers that you've worked with, Dan, about that as a concept.
Not really. I think maybe a bit of frustration, a bit trying to effort ball. Maybe, I don't know. We saw it a bit the other day. Leicester game against Somerset. Marshall Lang was getting smacked around by Louis Kimber. And he started overstepping because he was getting kind of really trying to do that 90-mile-an-hour plus balls, and kept on overstepping. Kimber's hitting a 3-6 hit for 6. So he ended up going for 29 and an over. Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because in county cricket as well, no balls worth 2. So in this match, if that was the same rule, England would have a lead of 57 and not 27.
Wow. That'd be quite huge. There's a couple of other questions that I want to talk a little bit about tomorrow. Why is Butler struggling so much when the ball targets his off stump from Partha? I don't know. I think the reality is Butler's probably about an average Test cricketer. And average Test cricketers struggle when you bowl well at them, and that's what's going on. I mean, it's a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he hasn't prepared for red ball cricket. He hasn't played a red ball game all year," and it's like, I don't think. You've got to bear in mind the talent level you're working with here. You can have the best.
How many red ball matches did Rohit Sharma prepare for?
Well, exactly. Yeah. I think you just got to factor in that. You bowl well at a guy who's not that good at playing a moving ball. He's going to get out to it.
Divergence of formats is going to come in because, I can tell you now, Joe Root's going to have a good series against India in Test cricket, and then people are like, "Oh, but he has to play the World Cup," and I'm not. It's a different format. It makes absolutely no bearing on a selection decision at all. It shouldn't.
Yeah.
People are like, "Oh, Harry Brooks done great in the 100, and of course he has. I'll get him in the Test team." No. They're players like Butler, maybe even Bairstow you can throw in this bracket as well. Just accept that they're amazing white ball players. Just let them get on with playing white ball.
Yeah, I think to some extent that is true. I suspect they though want to prove themselves as test cricketers. I don't think
be all things to all people. It's impossible.
Yeah. So they'll continue with that. At the same time as I say that, I'm not sure that Ben Foakes is necessarily the transformative player that some people think he is. He's probably about the same.
He's not going to be any better than Butler. Probably a better keeper, but he's no better.
Right, tomorrow, Dan. India 27 runs behind. They'll start the day batting. Obviously, the wicket fell with the last ball of today's play, as Anderson was bowled by Shami. What do you see as the potential routes for victory for each team?
India scoring minimum 3 and over tomorrow to get the deficit down to about 250 by stumps.
Yep.
There's another avenue as well if they get rolled for 200 and then England collapse batting last, which is very, very possible. Whereas I think obviously for England, they're going to want to try and avoid as much scoreboard pressure as possible. So that a good first session for England tomorrow is 100% critical for their chances at this test.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of those occasions when batting third is very, very difficult from an Indian point of view because they have to bat some time because otherwise they'll leave England with too long to get whatever score they get. Mm-hmm. But they also have to score a decent amount of runs because again they don't want to be bowled out at lunch tomorrow 200 ahead or something like that because they've tried to bat for too long. So they do have to play some shots. The pitch showed some signs of coming to life from a bowling point of view this evening. So I think it could be quite tricky for them. Google, which I think usually has a decent win predictor, has India at 31%, the draw at 28%, England at 41%. Is that a fair reflection?
No, I'd flip England and India around.
You're flipping. You think India have got a better chance of winning?
Mm-hmm.
What's the
on a bat last Test match is generally not a great prospect, which is why I'm not a massive fan of inserting teams when you win the toss, like England did today in the day one. And as much as I hate India's 8 to 11, I just think that they've got better batters than England. If India get Joe Root in the second innings, that's the game. Yeah, no,
I think that's possibly true. I mean, the only thing I'd venture as a counter argument to that is that because it's effectively a one innings game played over 2 days, a 90 over limited overs match. I think that India will have to bat for so long that England will have the chance of they'll have a lot of control over whether they go for the draw or whether they win or whether they go for the win. Yeah. And I think that this is one of those occasions where batting last is potentially advantageous. If the pitch doesn't get more difficult than it was this evening, then chasing 220 to 250 batting last on the last day should be something that even this England team would achieve. 1 in 2 times, 1 in 3 times, and that is maybe realistically the worst case scenario. They may well but roll India for 200 and be chasing 175. In which case they should win that 7 out of 10 times probably. Yeah. So I think I like if I were either team here, I think obviously the 27 run deficit is nice, but I think India's task is a lot harder than England's to. Kick England out the game, as it were. If India do their very best, England are still going to have a 40% chance of winning this on day 5, and their chance of winning at the moment is 40% according to Google. So I like England's chances. I think that's more or less everything we've got to cover. Dan, unless you've got any other topics?
No, I'm good. I think covered it pretty well.
Cool, great. Well, we will be back tomorrow. I think you're on again, aren't you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, 2 days.
It'll be with Max tomorrow because Ross and I are playing cricket at Hackney Marsh. So we'll be out of action. It should be a pretty good day's cricket, I think. Set up quite nicely. Sorry?
Where are Max and Ross today? Sleeping off a hangover from yesterday?
I think so. Max was playing actually. Ross was at Lord's. No, Ross was at Lords again. He's gone for the double header.
Oh, okay.
So his liver's, going to be in trouble. But yeah, that's all good. Thanks for joining us, Dan. Looking forward to your thoughts after tomorrow's game. A reminder for everyone at home, we're sponsored by Woodstock Cricket. TCP25 for 25% off their gear. Patreon.com/The Cricket Pod. The link is in the show notes. Go and click that. Sign up as a Patreon. We're on Twitter and Instagram at The Cricket Pod. And I occasionally write Substacks if you want to look at my attempts at graphs. Anyway, have a good one.